Okay, so this could be a tricky one because Chelsea have to get back to winning ways. So let's go into it. We're going to talk about the tactics that could occur. Bournemouth have been on a 5-game winless streak. Now, this comes at a brilliant time to make the video because I have literally just for work this week gone into a bit of a deep dive as what's gone wrong for Bournemouth. So it'll be a good time to sort of speak about it and speak about how this could affect our game against them. So let's start off with the team because I've made a few changes to the Chelsea team. James obviously coming back, Fofana coming back, both huge additions back to the team. I also think Gusto will come in and play a part from the start in this game for the intensity levels. In terms of who plays in and around the attacking positions, I think both of these wingers will come in. I think Esteval and Gittins will likely be left until the week game against Atalanta. The middle of the pitch, I would not be surprised if either of these are dropped. And that's kind of why I haven't made a choice on it yet. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Cole that comes in and starts with the lap, for example, because Pedro was really poor in that last game. But that front two is going to be interesting, sort of that number 10 and that striker, especially because of how we could set up in this game. From Bournemouth's point of view, they have got Senesi back and... Oh, let me just turn that off. Milo Savic is he's injured as well, so he won't be there. So Senesi comes straight back in. That makes a lot of sense. And then the rest of the team, Tyler Adams is also out suspended. They're also missing Lewis Cook suspended, and Ryan Christie is out for injury. So in terms of the midfield, it could be really interesting because it could be having to play Alex Scott and Tavernier as sort of a midfield too. And what we're going to speak about, and I do think that Evan Nielsen will probably start this game as well. Because what we're going to speak about is how Bournemouth have struggled in recent weeks. And I think a lot of it comes down to, obviously, a lot of their identity is based around that high press. And when it comes to winning the ball back as quickly as possible, and then being able to attack a distorted block, essentially, against any team they play. Now, in recent weeks, their numbers in terms of winning the ball back in this middle third have drastically dropped. It was around 24 per game, and it's dropped to, I think it was around 22 per game, and it's dropped to like 16. So, like, for them, that's a big number because these moments in a game, that's where they're launching their chances. That's how they're disturbing the opposition team. They also have a 9.5 PPDA, which is the highest. They have the most intense press in the Premier League. And I think that their inability to really carry it out recently and teams finding that space, therefore, between the lines. Something City did really well. And you can see it here if you look at sort of, you've got Semenyo much deeper in this area. And then you've got sort of these guys all jumping forward. But the defensive line, as you can sort of see here, is often quite a way away from that. And you end up with this big space in the middle of the park where teams can exploit. And that's what Manchester City did really well with those central overloads that they managed to create against Bournemouth. And I think Bournemouth are struggling to sort of generate those turnovers in the middle of the park at the minute, which afford them the ability to then attack quickly and go. Now, you can see here, this is kind of what they've been doing a little bit more in that sort of 4-1-4-1 shape, having Tyler Adams a little bit deeper, sending two forward, and then that would shift into a 4-4-2. Now, the wingers, again, you can go back and see Semenyo's positioning here. The idea is for them to always be quite narrow on the pocket players, especially if it's a wing-back inverting, sort of Semenyo inverted in there, sort of closing in with him, because then if that ball does break in the middle, they've got more bodies ready to sort of swarm the ball. They can win it and then they can go direct, as we just spoke about. In the middle of the pitch, that is where Bournemouth want to win the ball. So, yeah, this is sort of the shape they transition into. And then in terms of their attacking sort of quality, where they've had more of the ball in their own half lately, or more of the ball that they've had to play with, I think their possession's gone up from around 50% when they were at the start of the season, where they'd won, or they were really doing really well, 9 games in, doing really well. Now, in the last 5 games, where they've had 4 losses and a draw, that possession has gone up to 57%. So it's forcing them to have more of the ball, less in transition, and more having to break down a little bit with defenses. They are direct with these passes into these areas. Trufer, you can see, for example, here, putting that ball into Semenyo. But where they're struggling to sort of generate those chances and not get in behind as much. They're relying a lot on that counter press, which is, again, another part of this game that's going to be really, really important, because what they will do, and I think I've got an example of it coming up, this is what they sort of do on the ball, almost drop into that 3 at the back. This is Alex Scott dropping into that 3 at the back. You've got just that shot here, Truefair going forward, got the fullbacks wide, and you've got Tyler Adams as that sort of lone pivot. But they're going to try and get that ball into an area where, if we get this out, look how many bodies they can put around the ball. And even like you look at where Semenyo is there. Semenyo and Truefair, that's the left winger and left back on that side of the pitch, looking to win the ball. They want to create those clusters from direct kicks out from the back, or from these sort of build-up moments where they can have like a little net further forward to win that ball back, and again, counter-press and create chances from that. So that's kind of why I think this game, as intense as Bournemouth are with their press, as intense as they are with their counter-press, and as direct as they are with their sort of willingness to try and penetrate through the lines with diagonal passing or with carries and trying to sort of force mistakes, I do think that this is a game where you want to, again, as we've struggled against Leeds and Sunderland, we need these players like Wes and Reece and Gusto, who are big athletic sort of characters for the team and allow you to win lots of those second balls. I wouldn't even be surprised if he goes for Fernandes and Santos as a midfield 3. The only reason I think he might not is, one, if Cole's available, you want to sort of give him maybe 45 minutes now, so maybe he plays the first half. Also, like I said, their midfield is kind of flagging at the minute in terms of physicality. So maybe that's enough to sort of not go with that midfield 3, and you can afford that sort of more lackadaisical number 10, even though Palmer can sort of cover ground in those second balls himself due to his sort of longer limbs. So in terms of how Chelsea could set up in this game, considering Bournemouth will press in a 4-4-2, let me just switch to that now. So if we look at the idea of this 4-1-4-1, which then transitions into that 4-4-2 that we spoke about, the personnel instantly to have that sort of one sitting player, usually being Tyler Adams, that instantly changes because you don't have that same sort of defensive midfielder who can cover such amounts of ground to be really secure in this area. So what you probably have is Scott follow Cole Palmer, and then eventually you create this sort of tension on this side of the pitch, which either becomes Tavernier follows Cucurella all the way back and they become much more passive in the press, or they let Tavernier go onto Fernandes, they let Adley sort of come all the way with Cucurella into this area, which is part of the reason why I think in this game you could see Cucurella and Fernandes doing those interchanges quite a bit to try and lose their markers. And this is something we spoke about with those sort of right-sided rotations between these three that we spoke about in a few videos back, especially when opposition teams look to use their winger to cover this pocket. Then what it can also do is then, again, by drawing the fullback inside, it takes their winger all the way inside and deep, and then it can open up this sort of passing lane much easier from here to here, and then get you on the front foot with your winger on the left. So that's something that I think we could see, and I think that those rotations would be key, and it would also give Chalobah a lot of time to sort of operate in that left centre-back area. And considering his angle bias, it would be good that if you can sort of relieve him of that. Now, again, it could be Badiashile. Maybe he goes for Badiashile and Wes. Who knows? And then in terms of sort of how we manipulate here, again, similar with Gusto, I think Semenyo, sometimes he sits a bit deeper. But that is, again, that's based on other people sort of building strategy. I think with this, he would be quite high, ready to jump onto Gusto. And that's kind of his primary role. Same with Truefair and Neto, because Palmer is sort of being man-marked by Scott. So this would give Chelsea that ability to build down this left-hand side with those rotations, but also the ability to sort of draw players out on this right-hand side and then try to find, for example, Delap running into the channel, because that gives you a more direct option towards goal. Now, of course, you've got Reece in here as well for sort of those bounce passes. And I think it could be an interesting game in terms of the build-up, because again, when Bournemouth do go aggressive, they do have an aggressive press. Let's say Adley doesn't drop all the way onto Cucurella, and it ends up being, and they do transition to the 4-4-2. So Adley sort of, let's say Adley almost jumps up, and then maybe, for example, let's say that they transition to go full man-to-man here. So if they transition into that full man-to-man press, this is where you can start to find space between these lines, as we spoke about earlier, because Kukurea becomes the free man in here, and it leaves the centre-back having to make that big jump. And this is somewhere where City sort of managed to manipulate against Bournemouth, because they had Haaland making the simultaneous runs in behind, and it left these two players here, if we connect them, it left those two central defenders unsure whether to jump into the pockets when there was those central overloads or to fall off. And it could sometimes either create a big distance between the two or that sort of moment of indecision. And sometimes all you need is that moment of indecision to be enough time for Kukurea to collect the ball, face forward, and then Senesi is in trouble because he's not close enough to sort of make contact. That ball can go through to Garnacho. That ball can sort of go into the lap. That ball can come inside. Let's say Reece is moving forward or someone to sort of bounce it in here and face forward. There's lots of different ways that you can then progress the ball into more dangerous areas on the pitch. So I think Kukurea would be a massive key in this game. And I think that in general, I think that physicality to sort of deal with that second ball that we spoke about here will, of course, be key. So that's why the likes of James, Gusto, Fofana will be important for the intensity of this game, because Chelsea need to get back to winning ways after that loss against Leeds. And let's just say it's going to be an interesting one. Let me know your predictions down below. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And I'll see you in the review, which will probably be Monday, but we'll see. So leave all your likes, support, comment, all that good stuff. And I'll see you guys in the next one.